Hello, career thought leaders, and those of you interested in how to use AI in your job search and careers. We're glad that you're here because that's what we're going to talk about today. And today we're going to talk a little bit about sentiment analysis and what that means and how we can use some tools to be able to figure out how are we coming across in our messages. And I'll just say up front that there's not as many free tools as the internet said there was. So we are going to look at some tools, but they're just not as accessible as I was hoping they would be. And in fact, some of the tools that used to do this pretty easily now seem to make it a little bit more complicated. However, the general idea is if you are writing online, if you're commenting, if you have a profile, how do you help people figure out what that sounds like to other people? And this kind of came around because we had someone in our Facebook group, we have a colleagues Facebook group, and they were asking about a client that was not getting a job, interviewing, not getting a job. And one of the challenges that the coach thought might be happening is that on the person's LinkedIn profile, their comments and their posts were not very positive. And we know this is happening right now. We see people posting about losing their job, posting about some of these things, and there's nothing wrong with that. And we want to think about what is the overall sentiment that I get when I look at your engagement, when I look at your profile, how is that coming across to me? And so we're going to show you a few tools that you can use to be able to find that out. Now, one of the things that I'll say up front is that we want to get this information as easily as possible. So ChatGPT can no longer read your LinkedIn profile. It can't read your engagements. It can't do that anymore. Used to be able to, but I saw a post going around on the internet that said, oh, ask ChatGPT to do an analysis of your digital brand, and it's not going to be able to include some of those sites anymore, and LinkedIn being a main one, because it's not allowed to scan your LinkedIn activity anymore. But you can get around that in a few simple clicks and a little bit of a wait. So let's go through the clicks, and then obviously I did this a while ago, so I can use my content, but you'd have to wait to get to where I'm going to go now. So when you are on LinkedIn, and I was just showing this to our colleague group here, but when you're on LinkedIn, you can come in and you can access your settings and privacy, and then jump into your data privacy, and it will give you the opportunity to get a copy of your data. And what you're really wanting is to download your larger archive of data. That gives you at least one very good thing that we're going to talk about, which is all of your posts you can get in one place. So you can get all of your posts that you've ever posted on LinkedIn all in a spreadsheet when you do this download. Now, for a while, this wasn't giving me my shares, and I was getting kind of frustrated because that's what they're called, as shares, when it comes in the file. And I was getting frustrated because it was giving me everything else, but it wasn't giving me the shares piece. And as I'm doing this, I'm just wondering if I look this up. I know it gives you your shares, which is what we're going to talk about using, but I believe it also gives you your contacts. Not your contacts. Yes, it gives you that. I believe it also gives you your comments, which I've never opened because it has felt really overwhelming to me. But if you're working with someone who's not as active on LinkedIn as us who are career professionals tend to be, it might be worth it to have them look at their comments in that file, not just their shares. But I'm going to have to confirm that later and drop it in the chat, because I was most worried about having the shares available to me, and that's what I focused on. So what can we do with these shares once we've exported our data from LinkedIn? The whole point of this is, how am I coming across? What are people seeing about me? Am I connecting to my audience? And so most of the time when we get into some of these kind of fun things that you can do with AI, and what I love about it on a coaching level is that to be able to do these things, we have to be able to answer questions that most of our clients can't answer. So number one question is, who is your target audience? Of course, if they're applying to jobs and they're interviewing, they have some idea of what that looks like, but they're going to need to get a little bit more specific so that we can do the analysis, especially when we get to how you can do it in ChatGPT. But before we get there, let's look at a few other tools that we can use to do this. And first, I'm going to go through Grammarly. So the free level of Grammarly will give you some of this. I do have a paid version, so I'm not quite sure where the cutoff is and what's available for free and what's available in a different way, or if you pay. I love it. I know there's other tools that you can use to help with your analysis of your writing and making sure that you're writing well, but this is one of the tools that I use. Now, Grammarly gives you tones. It doesn't necessarily give you sentiment analysis, but it will tell you if it's confident, formal, optimistic, friendly, neutral, negative, or uncertain. So it'll give you some of that information about what you write. But I wanted to walk you through what it looks like so you can decide if it's worth it for you to try out an account if you want to play around with it if you haven't before, or if you're using it as like a Chrome plugin or a Microsoft Word plugin, but you've never actually gone to Grammarly. This is what it looks like. And I was just playing around with this earlier. So let's pull it up. So when I go into Grammarly here, it has all these things that have been uploaded. It doesn't track other things, but these are documents, books that my spouse is writing that he's using Grammarly to help him edit. But I can go and click on new upload. And what I see is, let's see if it will do this, if it will show you the pop-up. No. Okay. So I'm going to flip over to this other tab and show you what popped up the first time I did it. I saved it because I was worried it wouldn't pop up again. But this is what you get when you go in the first time to do a Grammarly, what's the right call? An assessment, right? You're going to assess. And so I think this is interesting because you're saying like, these are the goals for my writing. What am I writing about? What's my intent? Who's my audience? And then I can play around with some of that. So I'm going to go in here and choose my goals. So I'm doing business, let's say. I'm sure we'll try convince. I don't know. My audience is experts, right? All of you. And neutral. I don't necessarily want to be overly formal or informal. So I'm just going to do that. And it's going to say that I can set the goals every time I start a new document, which is kind of fun. So here I've got my shares. So I didn't even clean them up. I just posted in all of my LinkedIn posts for the last month. That's what's in here, is all of my LinkedIn posts for the last month. And you can see that it's giving me a score of my writing. It's giving me some of those things. And I can check in, I can reset my goals if I want to. I can look at my overall score. It's going to tell me my readability and vocabulary and some of those things. Then it's giving me suggestions over here. And this is where the sentiment analysis that it used to do has gotten a little bit buried. And now it's more like giving me how to rewrite it and how to sound more confident, but it's not telling me my specific, this is how it's coming across. And which is kind of a bummer because it used to do that, right? It used to tell me this is confident, this is whatever, and it would tell me what that looked like. So now I can just get ideas for improvements. They've added in all these AI features, which is sometimes the way it goes, right? They add in all these features and now it doesn't give me what I want it to give me anymore. You can check for AI text and plagiarism and get those reviewed suggestions. So I guess I'm kind of demonstrating that Grammarly doesn't do what it used to do in terms of giving you that sentiment analysis. You can set your voice now here of how you want it to sound, but it's kind of a bummer that you can't get that sentiment analysis like you used to. But that's all right. We're going to look at some other tools where you can do that. All right, so let's head over to our pal ChatGPT, and you can do this in other places. I'm going to do it in ChatGPT because I trust ChatGPT to do what I want it to do right now. Whereas Claude and some of those other ones have been saying that they're too busy and they don't have enough space. I don't have a paid account there. I do have a paid account on ChatGPT, but you don't have to have a paid account ChatGPT to do what I'm doing. Although you may not be able to post in as much content as I am going to post in, because I'm just going to post all of the posts that I have in my clipboard right now from my LinkedIn account. So you could do this with your profile. That's fine. But again, our use case is, hey, I'm working with a client. I feel like some of their posts are coming across as negative on LinkedIn. How do I help give them that feedback? And I love this because it gives me some idea of what I could do to give feedback without having it come across as personal, like my personal opinion. That's what these tools are great for. Okay, so let's jump in and look at how we can get ChatGPT to do this with us. I'm going to just show you my screen, ChatGPT here, and a blank thing. So I'm going to post in all of my chats. And this, again, these are all of my LinkedIn posts from the past few months. And then I'm going to add my prompt up here on the top. That was just what I had in my clipboard at first here. So there's a lot of different things that you can use this for. We're going to go through a few different prompts. I'm just going to do them one at a time so that we're building on ourselves here. So analyze the sentiment of this text. Tell me if it sounds positive, neutral, or negative. And then I've got all of my posts in here. So let's see what it says. Very simple question, right? Positive, negative, or neutral. What I sometimes like, sometimes not, but sometimes like about ChatGPT is that it's giving me more than I asked for. So it's giving me additional feedback on top of just, is this positive, negative, or neutral? And so it's going to help me see what I've got and what I want to do with it. If this is something you could see yourself doing with a client, drop me a chat, let me know. All right, so mine is mostly positive, some are neutral. There we go, we got started, and all of our, month's worth of posts are loaded in there, or I could do a month's worth of comments or whatever I want to do to help my client figure out what they're doing. Now I could say, how how would my audience of career coaches and resume writers describe my brand voice in these posts? So this might be helpful if you're working with someone, they want to know, how am I coming across? You can ask how their audience would see their posts, how they might describe their brand voice. And you can pick the language that fits for your client situation. So I could ask, how would they describe my brand? How would they describe my expertise? What areas would this show I'm an expert in? I could say, how would this come across to a hiring manager? So if I'm working with that job seeker who's posting some things, I could just ask, how would a hiring manager describe the sentiment of my posts, and just see what kind of information I can get about what they might see in those posts, and then it's more objective than it just coming from me. So it gives me some great language. If you're doing this for marketing purposes, obviously this would be great. What's coming across, but then I also want to think about what's missing. And these are the coaching questions for our clients. Is, sure, these are some very positive things. but what's missing? And I'm not asking, is there anything missing? That's a yes or no question. I'm asking that coaching question of what's missing, or how else do you want to be perceived? Or what else is important about you that's missing? Because I want them to really think about, are there any gaps here? But if I ask it with that closed question, or are there gaps, or is there anything missing, it's really easy to just say no. Oh, this is all covered, right? So I want to use those what or how questions when I'm evaluating the outputs to say, okay, this is what I'm seeing. So let's just take a swag at it as a hiring manager. So, what might a hiring manager for a career coach think about these posts? What positives would they see and what negatives? And again, if you're working with a client who's posting things, and you could do this with Facebook, you do this with any platform. Again, I just grabbed my LinkedIn posts for the last month from my downloads, and I could see what do they see as the positives and negatives. Then it's coming from kind of this third party place. I might do this for a client. I'd be careful about what I do in terms of their personal content, but I would try to see what that feedback might look like before I would demo this from them, because if it's really negative, I'd want to be able to know that before it's going to happen, right? And they're posting, they're commenting on LinkedIn. Those things are pretty public, so I might drop a few of them in here without a name. I don't have to do that, and just see what analysis it could come up with. Give me an idea of what might come out before I do this with a client. You have to kind of weigh the pros and cons. If you really think it's getting in their way, posts and comments are public on LinkedIn. And so I might put a few of them in here and see what I get. Negatives. More focus on thought leadership than coaching. Yes, if you're going to hire me as a coach, that might be a concern. Heavy emphasis on AI and innovation. Um, Limited discussion of career coaching fundamentals. So I haven't talked about that much in the last month. That probably bump that up, right? So I'm getting some examples. It's interesting that it even said the best roles that I'm creating a brand to fit into, and is that aligned for my client? And is there changes that they might want to make to how they're posting or what they're saying that would give better outputs here? So this is quite fascinating. Again, it might not do this exact same thing next time I do it or next time I ask for it. But now that I know it's possible, I could create this part into the prompt of what roles would they think I'd be a good fit for based on my LinkedIn activity. So fascinating. Sometimes you get things you don't even expect, but then now we can make that part of our process next time. So a lot of people also are thinking about, how do I analyze my brand voice? And that's another piece that we could do here now that we have the content in here. We did it a little bit of the overall brand voice, but now I'm just going to ask it to describe it to me in a few words. So let's just do that. Describe my brand voice in 10 words. And it's always more verbose than you tell it to be. So let's see if it can follow directions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Hey, it did it, although it used 4 compound words. But then you could say, okay, is this coming across how I want to be seen? Why or why not? If I want to adjust it, making sure that it's authentic, because we don't want to try to be something that we're not, but we also may just not be including that part of ourselves in our posts and want to add more of that in. So you can boil it down to something that then you could use later. I could even ask AI, to create a description of my brand. save you $30 of a training on how to train AI to be in your voice. It's maybe not as good as some of those classes might lead you to, but it's really not, doesn't have to be super involved to have a little statement that you can put into the instructions of your system or to put in at the beginning of a prompt thread to have something sound like you. There you go. Now I've got a little brand voice guide in just a few minutes by putting in my posts from LinkedIn. So those are some of the ways that we can use ChatGPT to get this sentiment analysis. I want to show you just one other tool. So now we've talked about, okay, analyze my posts, tell me, how is this coming across? What's my overall brand? How is it appealing to a hiring manager or to my audience? And then what is my brand voice? How can I prompt you to use my brand voice in the future? And we went all through that in just one thread. Actually, what I can do, and I'll come back later. Hi, Tim. It's good to see you. Yay. So what I can do, and one of the parts I love about ChatGPT is that you can pull the prompt, the whole thread, and share it. But I have to make sure I didn't do it inside of a GPT, because when you do it inside of a GPT, it doesn't let you share the link, which is frustrating because I like to be able to share the link to the entire chat. Oh, good. I did it outside of a GPT. So I'm going to copy this link. I'll drop it in the chat now. It won't populate across all of the platforms that we're on. But for those of you who are on LinkedIn and Facebook and YouTube, for some reason it doesn't do it on LinkedIn. So those of you on LinkedIn, I'll come back and drop it. But this chat thread here, it's a long URL, but it will give you exactly that chat that I was just having, where I put in all my LinkedIn posts for the last month and then prompted to get my brand voice and some of those other things. So the last thing that I want to share with you is not a generative AI tool, but it is an AI tool called Human Linker. And I've been using this off and on for the last few months, maybe 6 months. And it's interesting because for free, you can get profiles of people's personalities based on their LinkedIn account. So let's head over there and I will pop that up onto the screen. So here in Human Linker, you set up an account. I have a free account. I haven't paid for anything. Then you've got a place where you go to My Contacts and you can add people who you want to see their overview of who they are. And when I do that, I did it for myself. I'd recommend that's where people start, right? It's very interesting because it pulls your profiles, it pulls your experience, pulls all of that in. Then it gives you a personality assessment based on your profile and your activity. Now, there's another tool that we use that I think is more accurate. This to me feels like more how you are perceived. So this is not an accurate disc for me, but it's interesting that this is how it says I'm being perceived. So I'm being perceived as influential, which on my regular disc is like very small. But that's, this interesting to see. Okay, how is it being? How am I coming across as in the middle between direct and reflective, very outgoing, in the middle between steady and dynamic, a little bit more towards steady, over here on the creative side. Then it gives you things, which is helpful if you are doing someone else's, but you have to remember that it's not 100%. But most of these tend to be pretty accurate. The naturally tends to, stressed by, motivated by. This is going to be a little bit more dependent on how much content the person has in their profile versus being able to use their interactions and those types of things. It gives me engagement tips, so how I might approach communication. Using emoticons actually probably wouldn't do that great for me unless it's unless we already know each other. I don't know about that one. And then this social button is new. Oh, it's just showing the person's latest posts, so you can interact with their posts. So you can use this to network, you can use this to engage with people, but you can also use it, for your client, for themselves, to just see how are they being perceived, by LinkedIn. Obviously not specific to their audience, but it is giving you some analysis of how you're coming across on LinkedIn. So those are the tools that we went through. We went through Grammarly, which unfortunately has it's buried some of their sentiment analysis tools. They're still there. They're there when you write individual posts, but it doesn't seem to be doing an overall sentiment analysis for me like it used to, which is kind of a bummer. Then we talked about using ChatGPT and the prompt train that I went through to analyze my posts. Again, there's a lot of flexibility there. What do you want to know? What does your client want to know about how their posts are being perceived? Making sure that you're working in that target audience when you're doing that. What is their target audience? And how can you add that into the chat? And then the last one there being human linker that you can use to get some ideas of how LinkedIn is analyzing and perceiving your profile and a little bit of your activity. It's kind of unclear how much of your activity goes into that analysis that human linker is doing. So I am excited to hear what you all think, if you're doing any sentiment analysis or how you're helping your clients figure out what makes sense for them as they're doing engagement. So for those of you on LinkedIn, I just dropped my ChatGPT chat link thread so that you can go in and see that whole chat thread that I was doing. And if that's helpful for you or your clients, come back, drop me a note, let me know if this is helpful and what other topics you want to learn about as we talk about Friday in career services. We are not doing our third Friday next Friday because I'm going to be out of town. So we won't see you again until the first Friday in April. So take care, everyone, and we'll see you for our next Friday, AI in career services in April.